So how do you treat ick? In this video, we're going to discuss how I treat ick. And there's lots of different ways that people treat ick. It's one of the most common, if not the most common, illness in fish. And as you can tell, I'm a little under the weather right now, so you'll have to bear with me and work through the nasally sounds. But in this video, we'll talk about how I treat ick. So stay tuned, and we'll give that some thought. Stand by. Alright, so we're down here at my quarantine tank, and this is the second time that I have got new fish that I notice signs of ick. Now, there could be a number of reasons why they didn't come in with signs of ick, and ick did not appear for probably a week and a half or so. So it just goes to show you how important it is to quarantine your fish for an extended period of time, 2 weeks up to a month, depending on how you quarantine your fish and if you preemptively treat them. I don't typically preemptively treat them. I just monitor them and look for signs of any illness. And like I said, I noticed ick on the black angelfish as well as on these cardinal tetras. So I took immediate action. As you can see, the tank is raised to 84 degrees. You could certainly raise it higher. Some people do. Raising the temperature higher increases the life cycle of ick, which is a parasite. So, succinctly put, ick is a parasite that attaches itself to the fish, and then it subsequently falls off the fish into a cyst, which floats to the bottom or sticks on various surfaces of your tank. When that cyst hatches, it essentially morphs into more ick, more and more and more ick, which is why if you don't treat ick, you're going to notice that your fish have more and more white spots as time go on, and they will eventually succumb if they're not treated. And in fact, even if you don't see ick, which you'll usually first see it on the fins of your fish, even if you don't see ick usually attacks the gills first. So if you're seeing ick on the body of your fish or on the fins, like I said, most likely on the fins first, chances are that there is ick in their gills as well. So another thing you want to do in combination with raising the temperature, which increases the life cycle, which makes the medication kill ick quicker, because ick can only be killed when the cyst hatches and is free in the water. So it increases that cycle, and it increases the effectiveness of the medication by killing the ick quicker, which is what we want. You might also want to put an air stone in, like I have here, just because the temperature is higher, and the ick might also be limiting their oxygen. So the higher temperature is limiting their oxygen, and the ick is limiting their oxygen. And perhaps, I'm not exactly a scientist or anything, but the medication could, depending on what medication you're using, limit their oxygen. So stand by, and I'll show you my procedure. We will be using my medication of choice, which is going to be IckX. Comes highly recommended by a lot of experienced aquarists, and it really does work very well. So stand by, and we'll get to that.
So the first thing to note is you want to use separate equipment when you're treating for ick or any other disease. So use a separate siphon, use separate buckets, and make sure you're just using those buckets and siphons for treating the tank in question and treating the fish in question. And for instance, I use a Python for most of my tanks to change water because it's more efficient and it's easier. But in this case, I am not using the Python to change water because I don't want to cross-contaminate my other tanks. I want to keep all the equipment separate. So just be mindful of that. Now, with IckX, it says to use this ultimate water dechlorinator. I do out of caution, but I've heard other people say that you really don't need to use it, but I do out of caution. And a lot of people say it doesn't really matter. Now with IckX, you're going to want to treat 5 milliliters per 10 gallons of water volume. This tank doesn't have a lot of things in it, so I just go by the directions. This is a 20-gallon quarantine tank, so I'll treat with 10 milliliters. In addition to that, you're supposed to do a 3% a third water change of the tank before each dose of ICX, which is what I'm doing here right now. Now this tank is 20 gallons, and I just change out 5 gallons out of the 5-gallon bucket, which isn't quite a third, but close enough, and it does work for me, being that it's close enough. If you want to be exact, you can certainly be exact, but in my experience, this works just fine. So here I am filling up the tank with the fresh water before I dose the meds. Now, you're going to want to continue treating with ICX until you don't see any visible signs of IC anymore. And after that, you probably are going to want to continue treatment for at least a few more days. Some people say up to a week sometimes. I just go a few days after I don't see any more visible signs of IC, and then I monitor the tank and test the water to make sure everything's okay. And also, do a visual check on the fish themselves to make sure they're fine. And then after a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, if I don't see anything, then I'm good to go, and I'll put these fish into their home tanks. So thanks for coming along with me on this little IC journey. If you're experiencing IC right now, don't worry. It'll be fine. Just get some meds, follow the directions, and everything should be okay. Thanks for watching, everybody, and happy fish keeping.